Video over the weekend, so the two-host video went up early week, and now we are in the midweek, and we have some big PlayStation news to talk. These news videos, you love PlayStation, and maybe to all. Alright, so the first thing I wanted to talk about today is whether or not you should buy a PS5 right now in 2023. Now, of course, if you're a returning viewer of this channel, you might already have a PS5 and you're sitting there like, why would I want to know if you should buy a PS5 in 2023? All I'm going to say is there are people out there who still do not have PS5s, and they might have analysis paralysis at this point, thinking about what's coming in the future versus what they can get right now. So right now, what you can buy is a PS5 with a disc drive and a PS5 with no disc drive. The one with no disc drive has been harder to find, I will say. People complain about that all the time in my comments and on Twitter and on Reddit. They say that Sony's holding those back. Obviously, because while they do cost $100 less at $400, they're not $100 less to produce. And Sony is really adamant about not losing money this generation. So obviously they're putting less of those out in the wild. With that being said, so much info about the Slim has been released at this point that I think it's fair to say I don't think you're going to be missing out on much if you buy the current PS5. And the reason I'd say look at the current PS5 is because A, Sony has already essentially made the internals of it a PS5 Slim. They've reduced the size and scale of the motherboard but kept the actual chassis the same size. And overall, it runs about 20% more efficient and cooler than it did at launch. And then additionally, there are plenty of bundles out there in the wild.
Revelio. Incendio! Fancy I'll have my own operation worked out one day. People working for
One way or another, we'll get what we're owed.
I wouldn't give for a cup of mushroom tea.
Someone's here. Let's get this over with. Rather unwise coming back this way. Ah, there you are. They were just here.
Only following orders. Leave your accusations in someone else's direction if you don't mind.
Wise decision running from me.
Don't tell us. Hello?
Such arrogance. I will make you pay. How nice of you to stop by. You suffer.
Incendio. Accio.
Seems your art isn't in this. That was meant for me.
Accio. Incendio.
Pity, not quite. I've been fighting since before you were born.
This is where you will fail.
Incendio.
Was that just it? Easily diverted.
Accio. Incendio.
I shall avenge your death. Red Rock will lead us to victory!
Accio. Incendio.
Not quite.
Get away with that. If only
Do your spells glance off of me?
Incendio.
No.
You can't stop us.
Why have you not run away? Intend to die, do you? I shall avenge your death.
Accio. Incendio. Incendio.
Expelliarmus.
You won't listen.
Incendium. Your blood's on Ranrock's hands. Revelio.
This must be Mr. Oakes's wand. Perhaps now he can set himself free.
You did it! I found my wand and... Wait, you're a student? Oh, we must get you to safety immediately. It's dangerous.
It's all right, Mr. Oakes. I've dealt with these goblins before.
Dear Merlin, you're either very lucky or very talented. Well, how did you find me?
I'm a friend of Adelaide's. She was worried about your business with Ranrock's loyalists.
Oh, she was right to be. I couldn't go through with the agreement, and when I told them, I ended up blindfolded and behind bars. Been locked in that infernal cell for so long, they'd forgot I was even there. I overheard things. If only I could reward you for what you've done. Blasted goblins stole every Knut on me. All I can say is thank you. Truly.
You mentioned you overheard things.
Sad tale, really. I think I know where Ranrock's unfortunate vendetta against wizardkind began. Although dragon breeding was outlawed by the Warlocks Convention of 1709, Ranrock stumbled upon an illegal dragon camp. He was young, found the creatures fascinating. He'd visit the camp in secret whenever he could, never making his presence known. After weeks of sly surveillance, he finally summoned the courage to speak to the wizard in charge. Ranrock wanted to join them, and the creatures. The wizard happened to drop his wand. Ranrock saw an opportunity. He picked it up, went to hand it back as a means of introducing himself. The sight of a goblin with a wand sent the wizard into an instant rage. He beat Ranrock nearly to death. Ever since, Ranrock has despised wizardkind, sees us all as cruel.
I'm grateful I was able to help you, Mr. Oakes. Adelaide thinks the world of you.
Oh, and I her. She's become quite savvy to my trading habits, always analyzing my detailed owls. If only I hadn't resorted to trading with such fiends. A lesson I shan't soon forget. Having my wombat is like being reunited with an old friend. I must return home and inform Adelaide of my safety. Will you be all right?
I'll be fine, Mr. Oakes. You get back to Adelaide. I assure you, her worries outweigh yours.
Oh, I'm anxious to see my dear niece. And then I plan to travel far from here for my next round of trading. Thank you. May life reward you justly for your deeds. Be well, my friend.
Mr. Oakes was lucky. Ranrock's lot would never have freed him.
Revelio. 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 Incendio. Revelio.
Bundles, I would probably skip that one just because they use that in Activision instead of making the next thing. It's calling the expansion for Modern Warfare 2 that's coming out this year, Modern Warfare 3. So I wouldn't really go for that Modern Warfare 2 bundle. You do also have two more options though that I think are the ones you should go for depending on what kind of gamer you are. One of those is the God of War Ragnarok bundle. Now no matter which bundle you get, digital or disc edition, you're going to get a download code for the game. And that goes for my second recommendation, which is the Final Fantasy 16 bundle. I have both of those, I'm pretty sure, linked in the description. If you use those links, I get a little bit of a kickback, but yeah, I personally, just because of the gamer I am, I would go for God of War Ragnarok. I beat that old game. I basically 100%ed it. I'm playing through New Game Plus right now, and I recommend that bundle enough. But if you're more into JRPGs and you're excited for Final Fantasy 16, I would go for that one. The only reason I would go for the current disc edition as the one to get versus the digital edition or the upcoming PS5 Slim is that the PS5 Slim that's allegedly coming out this year is going to have a detachable disc drive. So you're going to be able to buy it as a technical bundle with the disc drive attached to your PS5, but it will be removable. And also you're going to be able to get one with no disc drive, and then later on you can buy the disc drive.
Download the Domino's app today and become a piece of the Pride Rewards member point store free pizza.
Drive separately if you really wanted to. Whereas the unfortunate thing is, if you get the current digital model, which again is harder to get, you won't be able to use that disc drive that Sony is releasing on that model. For some reason, I think it really comes down to the fact that they're adding a special USB-C port to the back of the console, but the current PS5, the digital one, doesn't have that, so you can't use that external disc drive. So ultimately, I'd say, yeah, the PS5 is worth buying right now in 2023. Go for the God of War or the Final Fantasy 16 bundle. Make sure it's the disc edition, just because if you get the digital one now and you want to upgrade later, you won't be able to, and then you'll have to spend full price for a new console instead of just getting the disc drive now. And I know the PS5 Pro is coming out next year, but if you're on the PS4, we're at the point where PS5 games are going to be the norm that don't release on the PS4. So what you could really do is buy a PS5 now and maybe trade it in or sell it in a year when the PS5 Pro comes out and you really want that console instead. I mean, some people are going to be just fine with their current PS5, and I don't think there's going to be any meaningful upgrade with the PS5 Slim where you feel buyer's remorse if you bought a PS5 now. So is the PS5 worth buying in 2023? I give it a wholehearted yes if you're getting the disc edition. I would skip the digital edition regardless, just because, I don't know, it's not worth saving $100 just to get digital games that are most of the time full price, and you're basically relegated to using PS Plus if you want to play older stuff at a major discount. Next up, for my PS5 tip of the day, I saw a Reddit post where someone basically made a custom DualSense, and I thought about it for a sec, and it would be really easy. So there, DualSense is EVA themed. I have not seen this show. My friend Dustin from Sacred Symbols has been telling me to watch it for years at this point, and I will. I've just got a lot going on right now, and I have other things I'm watching, but I will watch it. I will say, the black, the purple, the green, it looks really good, and while this does look like a really complicated mod for the PS5 controller, I don't actually think it is. At the very least, you can mask off the controller and spray paint it, or you can go on Etsy and find these additional mods and components that are actually pretty cheap. Next up, let's talk about the big rumor that came out over the weekend related to PlayStation's next that actually has a pretty good track record, where they said that Sony is looking at buying CD Projekt Red, the makers of The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077. Now, I'm not gonna lie, when I saw this rumor, I immediately called BS. I was like, there's so many red flags here. The first one being that Sony doesn't really need to buy CD Projekt Red because they're doing just fine making very similar games to what CD Projekt is making. I mean, The Witcher 3, it's an open world third-person action RPG with dialogue. I just gave you that description, and I said, what is a Sony game that has the exact same description? You would immediately say something like Horizon Forbidden West or Ghost of Tsushima. Those are two games right off the top of my head that sound exactly like The Witcher 3. And as far as Cyberpunk 2077 goes, yes, it is a first-person shooter, but it's still an open-world RPG that's action-based, and that's pretty much every game Sony makes. So I immediately recognized that, and then it didn't take long for CD Projekt Red people who work there to shoot this rumor down. They also came out and said that CD Projekt is not for sale. So I'm actually kind of glad that the company is going to stay third party. They're going to release games on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, just because I know that everything is going to be consolidated eventually, and Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo are going to own every studio eventually, but for now, we can keep things less consolidated. That's exactly what I want to do. And just hearing CD Projekt say they're not for sale is nice to hear, because if Sony doesn't buy them and Microsoft doesn't buy them, the only companies that really need to buy them are like Tencent, and I don't want Tencent to own CD Projekt Red. Like, at that point, if they are even looking at CD Projekt, I think Microsoft and Sony are like obligated to at least put in an offer to try and buy that studio. But for now, they're staying third party, which I think is good. If Sony's going to pick up any publisher, I would really want it to be Konami for no other reason than their biggest IP, Castlevania, Silent Hill, and Metal Gear Solid. All of those are heavily associated with PlayStation. It's the same effect that Square Enix had with Final Fantasy VII Remake, where everyone just associates that game with PlayStation, so they released the remake exclusively on PlayStation. It's interesting to me that Konami is releasing Metal Gear Solid 3 Delta and the Master Collection on everything, whereas with Silent Hill 2 Remake, at the very least, it'll be a timed exclusive on PlayStation 5. And then unfortunately, we haven't heard anything about Castlevania. I'd assume that Konami is working on something in that franchise just because the Netflix show was so big. And then I think that the GBA collection they put out a couple years ago at this point did really well sales-wise. So yeah, I think all of those games would be, associated with PlayStation as time. News that came out over the weekend that really let me know all of this was BS is that Days Gone 2 is in development. I mean, look, like last week we got a tweet from Jeff Ross, the director of Days Gone, who left Ben's studio, where he said if that game was greenlit, it would have came out about a month ago and we would be playing it now. That's super disappointing. I'm one of the biggest fans of Days Gone pretty much out there. I played it when it came out. I was an evangelist of it then, despite its technical issues, and as it got better and was able to be played at 60 FPS on PS5 and then on PC, I was like, look, this game's awesome and people are finally coming around to it. Despite that, I mean, look at the fandom for Bloodborne, so he's still never even patched that game to run at an acceptable frame rate. So you look at that, and then you look at the stuff we've heard about Days Gone 2, and then we know that Ben Studio's working on a new IP. I'd say there's like a 99% chance that there's no development at all being done with Days Gone 2. Next up, let's talk about Dragon's Dogma 2. So this game, I think, fell a little flat during the showcase. It definitely didn't deserve to. The first game came out around the same time as Skyrim and Dark Souls, and people kind of looked away from it at that point because of that. But as time has gone on, people have rediscovered it, and there's been a real fandom for it. So yeah, I think people should be excited for this game. If you've never played it before, it's an open world RPG that kind of takes Monster Hunter style combat, and the cool unique thing about it is that you can build a party out of these characters called pawns. And people were making characters from other games with them, and I'm pretty sure your pawns would invade other people's games and help them out, and if they help other people out by that online system, they would level up and things like that. But because of that pawn system, people were wondering if this game would have co-op, and on the Capcom website for this game, it says that no, it's going to be a single-player game, and I personally think that's good. Capcom's never really been good with multiplayer, so I don't think they should start now, especially with a game that's taken so long to come out that people have been asking for so long. I'd rather them just make it a full-on next-gen sequel to Dragon's Dogma 1 and call it a day. I'm glad that's exactly what we're getting, and I hope Sony kind of catches on to what Capcom is doing, because they've been making so much money selling so many games because it's quality single-player stuff that they're putting out. Next up, let's talk about The Last of Us factions for a second. Now, interestingly, Ray said in my last video that he had heard from someone he knows that works at Naughty Dog that there just aren't enough people working on this game. And right after we recorded that video last week, Jason Schreier put out an article on Bloomberg where he confirmed that, yeah, Bungie came in and said, look, this game's not coming together right. It doesn't have the longevity it needs to. And because of that, Naughty Dog is taking a step back. They're reworking it, but they basically scaled down the team and put them on their next game. Naughty Dog kind of wanted to get ahead of it, but they put out a statement pretty soon after that was like, look, yes, we are delaying The Last of Us multiplayer game. We want to get it right, but look forward to us sharing more about our next single-player game very soon in the future, which to me, and I think a lot of other people, seem like damage control. I've been pretty critical of The Last of Us multiplayer game recently just because it's been way too long. This was announced by Naughty Dog when The Last of Us Part 2 came out, or around the same time, and all we've gotten since then is vague announcements related to it and then some concept art. Obviously something was going wrong behind the scenes, or they were making it way bigger than they needed to, and in my opinion at least, Naughty Dog should focus their efforts on single-player games, and at the very least, instead of making a multiplayer game, just make a single-player game with a multiplayer mode. So that's why at this point, I think what they should really do is focus on The Last of Us Part 3 and keep this small team working on whatever The Last of Us multiplayer game was going to be, and then just make it a multiplayer mode for The Last of Us Part 3. Or what they could do is cancel The Last of Us multiplayer game and then move all of those people onto a new IP or The Last of Us Part 3. I think any of those options would be good, just because Naughty Dog's a single-player studio. The thing that people are going to want from them is single-player games, and if this multiplayer game eventually came out and was really, really good, you would definitely see Naughty Dog shift to making exclusively multiplayer games in the future, and I don't think anyone really wants that. But yeah, I just mentioned it was weird not seeing Naughty Dog at the PlayStation Showcase, and it was definitely weird how few first-party studios we saw at the PlayStation Showcase where we actually want to know what they're working on. And look, I get that Sony has some new studios, they wanted to give them some time in the sun. I don't really care what those studios are working on until those games come out and are proven to be good. What I want to hear from is what's going on with Ghost of Tsushima 2, or some of the PC ports, or what any of the other studios that we already know about, like Bend and or Naughty Dog, are working on. So what Ray and I said in my last video is that Sony should have a second showcase this year where they show off first-party games, and interestingly enough, we've heard from leakers since then that Sony held back a lot of the stuff they were going to show off at this showcase, and a lot of it was from first party. A couple of those announcements were allegedly going to be Ghost of Tsushima coming to PC in October and Demon's Souls coming to PC in July. If Sony did remove those from the lineup, I'd completely understand, because what I think is that stuff should definitely be announced at the Summer Game Fest opening night thing that Jeff Keighley is doing, mainly because I really liked seeing Returnal and The Last of Us get announced for PC at the Game Awards. It makes sense to separate that stuff out because a lot of PlayStation gamers don't want to see time wasted in an actual PlayStation showcase on games they've already played years ago coming to PC. Like, save that for Jeff Keighley's thing. It'll be a big announcement for him, and it'll stop Sony from taking a rep hit from their PlayStation fans. If those rumors are true, I think we'll hear about that very soon at the Summer Game Fest. And anything else that was taken out, I think Sony is definitely saving for a second showcase later in the year. I think Sony definitely should get on a 2 showcase a year schedule, where they have one in June taking up that former E3 spot, and then towards the end of the year we get one in the fall that's like, hey, all the big games are out this year for the PlayStation 5, here's what you have to look forward to in the future. If they can get on that schedule and keep it going, I think that'd be great, and I think it was a smart move for them to take some games out for something like that, but they gotta tell us about it sooner rather than later. The issue was with this showcase that we just hadn't had one in so long that Sony really had a Sophie's Choice on their hands, where they had to say, look, it's better for us overall to take out some of these first-party games and announce them later in the year, but we definitely will take a reputation hit for it. They just need to get on a cadence where they can do one showcase in the summer and one showcase towards the end of the year, and I think everything's going to be fine just because Sony really hasn't given us any reason to doubt them.
My first time was in a car.
And was it magical?
No.
You